Imagine you and your best friend have spent the last 2 years building, just an incredible piece of software.
Yeah, you've probably sacrificed your weekends, completely drained your savings.
Exactly. I mean, you've poured everything into this, and finally it actually pays off. You land a meeting with a top-tier venture capitalist.
The dream scenario.
Right. The pitch goes flawlessly. The VC loves the product. They love the market. And they offer you a massive seed round, let's say $3 million.
Wow. Okay, so you're ecstatic.
You are. You're ready to scale. But then, during the routine background check, the investor's legal team makes a discovery.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. When you first incorporated your company, you filed like a single piece of paper with the state of Connecticut to form an LLC instead of forming a C corporation in Delaware.
Which sounds like a tiny administrative detail to a normal person.
It does. But the investor immediately pulls the term sheet. They just walk away.
Just like that.
Just like that. And to fix that one, seemingly minor paperwork mistake, so you can actually raise money in the future, it is going to cost you $500,000 in legal fees.
It is a brutal reality check.
It really is. And welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are basically tearing down the romantic mythology of the startup.
Yeah, because we have this collective cultural obsession with the brilliant coder in a garage, right?
Oh, totally. Surviving on ramen, sketching out a world-changing algorithm on a greasy napkin.
Exactly. We focus entirely on the product, the vision, the disruption, but the actual day-to-day reality of building a billion-dollar company is governed by something entirely different.
It's governed by invisible high-stakes machinery. The legal and financial architecture that, dictates whether those brilliant coders actually become billionaires or whether they end up completely bankrupt.
And our mission today is to deconstruct those structural forces.
Right, we are pulling insights straight from the legal and accounting masters of Silicon Valley. We're specifically diving into the frameworks taught by the experts at Y Combinator who have, overseen the formation of literally thousands of companies.
Which gives them this incredible bird's eye view of what actually works and what destroys a company.
Exactly. We are going to analyze the legal tripwires, the power dynamics, and just the foundational mechanics of modern entrepreneurship.
And there's a fascinating central paradox to all of this. If you read essays by prominent startup advisors, they will often explicitly tell founders not to get bogged down in the minutia of legal mechanics.
Right, they say focus on the product.
Yeah, they warn that focusing too much on paperwork takes your eye off the product, and the product is what actually matters.
Because without a product, you have nothing.
Exactly. But on the exact same token, failing to grasp these very basic foundational mechanics can literally destroy the company before the product even launches.
It's a tightrope walk.
It really is. You have to ignore the noise, but you have to build the structural integrity of the entity flawlessly from day one.
Because you, listening to this, you might think startups are purely about product market fit. You might think the battle is won in the code base or, I don't know, the marketing campaign.
But the true battles, the ones that decide who actually holds the power, who controls the board, and who walks away with the wealth, those are fought in equity splits.
IRS filings.
Corporate governance, yeah.
Whether you are an aspiring founder, an investor evaluating a pitch deck, just someone fascinated by how modern power is structured and leveraged, understanding these mechanics is a masterclass in how the real world operates.
It's the hidden wiring of the economy, really.
It is. So let's start right at the bedrock, the absolute first step, the architecture of the entity itself. Why is the literal formation of a company considered a structural force?
Well, it comes down to the concept of the corporate veil.
Okay, the corporate veil. Explain that.
So the primary purpose of forming a legal entity is not just to look official or to get a cool company name to put on your website. It is to protect the founders from personal liability.
Meaning keeping your personal bank account safe.
Exactly. When you incorporate, you are essentially creating a brand new, legally distinct person in the eyes of the law.
A corporate person.
Right. And if that new corporate person gets sued, maybe a product fails and causes damage or a massive contract is breached, the liability stops at the corporate wall.
So the plaintiffs can't just come take your house.
Exactly. They cannot pierce that veil to come after your personal bank account, your car, or your house. You are isolating the risk.
But to get that protection, you have to follow the rules of formation flawlessly.
Yeah.
And this is where the startup world is incredibly, almost terrifyingly rigid.
Very rigid.
The ultimate undisputed standard for a venture-backed startup is the Delaware C Corporation. Doing anything else is considered a massive, almost fatal structural error.
Yeah, which brings us back to that scenario you opened with,
The Connecticut LLC.
the Connecticut LLC. And that's not a hypothetical. That actually happened to a real company that Y Combinator worked with.
Wait, really? That exact scenario?
Yes, and the details of that specific case perfectly illustrate the sheer weight of these structural forces.
How does that even happen?
Well, this company thought they had been a Delaware corporation for a couple of years. They had been operating, hiring, building value. But due to a simple, paperwork error early on, the conversion never fully executed.
Oh, man. So legally, they were still just a Connecticut LLC.
Legally, they were still a Connecticut LLC, and when the venture capitalists discovered this during due diligence, everything ground to a halt.
I mean, just the phrase Connecticut LLC sounds like a nightmare for a Silicon Valley investor.
It does.
But why? Exactly. Why does an investor care if you're an LLC in Connecticut versus a C Corp in Delaware? Don't they both provide that liability protection you just mentioned?
They do provide liability protection, but they are fundamentally different vehicles, especially when it comes to taxation and investment mechanics.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, an LLC, a limited liability company, is what's called a pass-through entity.
Pass-through meaning.
Meaning the profits and losses of the company pass directly through to the personal tax returns of the individual owners.
Oh, I see.
Right. So if you are a venture capital firm managing a multi-hundred-million-dollar fund with hundreds of limited partners.
You absolutely do not want the complex, messy tax liabilities of a random startup passing through into your fund's tax structure.
Exactly. It creates an absolute accounting nightmare for the VC fund.
They'd be sending out hundreds of K-1 tax forms for every little startup.
Yes, and investors hate that. Furthermore, LLCs don't issue stock in the way corporations do. They issue membership units.
Which makes it hard to give equity to employees.
Incredibly difficult. It makes creating standardized employee stock option pools a total mess.
Okay, so that explains why it has to be a C corporation. A C Corp is its own distinct tax entity. It pays its own taxes, and it issues standard shares of stock that investors easily understand.
Right, it's clean.
But why Delaware? I mean, why not a California C Corp if the company is based in Silicon Valley? Or a New York C Corp?
This is one of the most brilliant, invisible monopolies in the business world.
Really? A monopoly by a state?
Yeah. It all comes down to the Delaware Court of Chancery.
Okay, I've heard of this.
Unlike most states, where corporate lawsuits are heard by a standard jury who probably has zero understanding of complex financial instruments.
Right, a jury of random people off the street.
Exactly. Delaware has a specialized court dedicated exclusively to corporate law, and cases are decided by highly expert judges, not juries.
So it's about predictability.
Complete predictability. Delaware has over a century of incredibly detailed, consistent corporate case law.
So if there's a dispute, everyone basically knows how it's going to end.
Yes. If there is a dispute between the board of directors and the minority shareholders, or, say, a fight over fiduciary duties during an acquisition, every corporate lawyer in the country knows almost exactly how the Delaware courts will rule.
And that predictability drastically reduces risk.
Drastically.
Yeah.
And when venture capitalists are investing millions of dollars into highly speculative early-stage technology, which is inherently risky anyway,
They want to ruthlessly eliminate every single ounce of non-product risk they possibly can.
precisely. They do not want to gamble on how a random judge in Connecticut might interpret a bespoke operating agreement.
So going back to our nightmare scenario, this company is a Connecticut LLC. They have to fix it to get the VC money.
Mm.
And you said the legal bill to untangle that single mistake was $500,000.
$500,000.
How does paperwork cost $500,000?
Because it took 4 different law firms across 3 states to fix it.
You've got to be kidding me. 4 firms.
4. They had to hire 2 firms in Delaware, 1 in Connecticut and 1 in Silicon Valley, to execute a complex cross-border merger just to retroactively fix the foundational paperwork.
That is insane.
$500,000 just to get back to the starting line so the investors would actually write the check.
Let me throw an analogy at this because I think it helps visualize the scale of the problem.
Sure, go for it.
It's like pouring the concrete foundation for a 50-story skyscraper. If you use the wrong material at the base, say you use cheap mortar instead of reinforced steel and high-grade concrete, you can't just easily swap it out once the building is halfway up.
Right, it's baked in.
Yeah, you have to bring in specialized structural engineers, prop up the entire massive edifice, carefully rip out the base without collapsing the building, and re-pour it. The cost? the time and the friction are astronomical.
That is an excellent analogy, but it's actually even worse than that.
Worse how?
With concrete, you just have a structural flaw that you eventually have to fix. With a weird corporate structure, you have a structural flaw that also acts as an active legal repellent.
A repellent.
Yeah, investors won't even walk into the building to look at the flaw. They just see the Connecticut zip code on the paperwork, realize the friction involved, and throw your pitch deck in the trash.
Because they have thousands of other companies to look at.
Exactly. They don't have the time or the desire to fix your foundation for you. Standardization is a massive structural force in the venture capital ecosystem. They want predictable, uniform, plain, vanilla legal vehicles.
Cool, and I really have to challenge this premise, though.
Okay.
Entrepreneurs are constantly told to think different, right? The entire ethos of Silicon Valley, the reason we celebrate these founders, is about breaking the rules, disrupting legacy industries, moving fast, and breaking things.
Right. The whole rebel narrative.
Yeah. So why is the very first step they take, the literal formation of their company, supposed to be unquestionably, rigidly conformist? It feels deeply contradictory to the entire spirit of startups.
It absolutely feels contradictory on the surface, but you have to separate the vehicle from the cargo.
The vehicle from the cargo. Okay.
This raises a crucial question about where innovation actually belongs in a business. You disrupt the market. You disrupt the technology. You do not disrupt the corporate structure.
Yeah.
Legal innovation is a massive distraction. The entity itself is just a vessel, a highly standardized, legally sound container designed to safely transport the actual innovation, which is the product.
So trying to invent, a new way to structure equity is just wasting time that should be spent writing code.
Precisely. You are innovating in an area that literally nobody pays you to innovate in. Your customers do not care how your bylaws are structured.
That's a great point. The end user just wants the app to work.
Right. And platforms like Clerky exist specifically for this reason. They allow founders to push a button and instantly generate this exact, pristine, vanilla Delaware C Corp setup, ensuring they don't waste precious brain cycles trying to reinvent corporate law.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The foundation is poured correctly. We have our perfectly vanilla Delaware C Corporation. It's a pristine, legally impenetrable empty shell.
Ready to go.
But an empty shell doesn't build a product. It needs to be filled with the most precious commodity in the entire startup universe, which is equity.
The currency of power.
Let's dive into equity allocation investing dynamics, because this seems like where things get really messy.
This is exactly where the messy human element crashes headfirst into the rigid legal structure. And it usually starts with the co-founders sitting around a table, ordering a pizza, and trying to decide who gets what piece of the pie.
And there is a brutally clear foundational rule that goes against everything pop culture tells us. Right? Ideas have zero financial value.
Zero.
The idea is mathematically worthless. Value is created entirely, 100% through execution. Therefore, equity must be distributed based on the grueling work that lies ahead, not the initial concept that brought people together.
And what is fascinating is how consistently early-stage founders get this wrong.
Really, it happens a lot.
Constantly. It is a psychological trap. Someone will sit at that table and say, well, I came up with the idea for this app while I was in the shower. I brought you guys in, so I should get 70% of the company, and you two get 15% each for building it.
Because they think they are the visionary.
Exactly. But if you look at the data from top-tier accelerators, the cohorts that produce the absolute highest valuations, the unicorns.
What does the data show?
There is a stark trend. Among those hyper-successful companies, there are virtually zero instances of significantly disproportionate equity splits among the founding team.
Wow. Zero instances.
Zero. The standard is an equal or very nearly equal split.
I love the analogy of an architect for this.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
Imagine an architect sketching a rough conceptual drawing of a building on a cocktail napkin. Then, they hand that napkin to a team of bricklayers, plumbers, electricians, and project managers and say, okay, build this over the next 10 years.
Good luck.
Right. Source the materials, brave the weather, risk your lives on the scaffolding. Oh, and by the way, I get 80% of the ultimate profits from this building because I drew the napkin sketch.
Right.
It's completely absurd. The people laying the bricks day in and day out for a decade are the ones creating the actual tangible value.
It is absurd, and yet you see amateur founding teams try to enforce that exact dynamic constantly.
Why do they do it?
Ego, mostly. But let's look at the psychology behind why an equal split is so vital. An unequal split is a ticking time bomb of resentment.
Okay, play that out for me.
So, if you are a technical co-founder with only 10% of the equity and you are working 100-hour weeks, sleeping under your desk, constantly debugging code alongside the idea founder who has 80%.
Yeah, that's going to get old fast.
Exactly. Year 3 is going to arrive, the burnout is going to hit, and you're going to look across the room and ask yourself, why am I destroying my physical and mental health to make this other person incredibly rich?
And then you just quit.
You quit. The company dies. An equal split is a fundamental acknowledgement that the next decade of execution is going to require identical, absolute levels of commitment from everyone involved.
Oh, wait, I have to play devil's advocate here. That completely ignores the reality of day one. Let's look at a real-world scenario. What if I'm emptying my 401k to pay for our initial Amazon web servers? What if I'm walking away from a $250,000 a year engineering job at Google, and my co-founder is fresh out of college, living rent-free at their parents' house, and contributing zero initial capital?
That happens a lot.
Right. You're telling me we still split the company 50-50? That feels deeply, fundamentally unfair.
That is the most common and, frankly, the most logical argument against equal splits. But you have to adjust your time horizon.
Okay, explain.
A successful venture-backed startup is a 10-year journey minimum. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that initial $50,000 you drain from your 401k or that early pay cut, it feels massive on day one.
He is a massive. It's all my money.
It is, personally. But statistically, over the lifespan of a successful company, it is a rounding error compared to the sheer volume of labor, stress, late nights, and value creation required over the next decade.
Okay, but it still feels like I'm getting a bad deal on day one. So how do you handle that financial disparity without permanently warping the cap table?
If that $50,000 is truly a tipping point, you handle it mechanically, not through equity.
Mechanically how?
The company should treat your $50,000 as a formal loan. You document it. And the agreement is that once the company raises its first round of institutional capital, the very first thing it does is repay your loan, perhaps with a slight interest rate.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right. You make yourself whole financially, but you do not use that early cash as a justification to permanently skew the cap table and plant the seeds of resentment that will blow the company up in year 4.
Okay, so let's say we agree. We split it equally, 50-50. We just get 5 million shares. Do we just print the stock certificates, shake hands, and get to work?
Absolutely not. And this introduces arguably the single most important mechanical protection a startup has: vesting.
Vesting.
Yes. You do not just hand over 50% of the company on day one. The equity must be earned over time.
This is a concept that so many people misunderstand. Let's really break down how this works. The industry standard is a 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff.
Yes, the famous 1-year cliff.
Walk me through the exact mechanics of that cliff. What does that actually look like on a calendar?
Okay, so think of vesting as a drip feed. If you have 5 million shares on a 4-year schedule, you are essentially earning 1/48th of those shares every single month for 48 months.
Okay, simple math.
But the 1-year cliff is a massive structural caveat. It means that for the first 365 days of the company's existence, that drip feed is completely paused. You are nothing.
So if you and I start this company, split it 50-50, and I decide on day 364 that startups are too stressful and I'd rather go back to my cushy corporate job, we'll walk away with what?
You walk away with absolutely zero stock. None. Every single share you held is repurchased by the company, usually for the fraction of a penny you initially paid for it.
Wow.
You leave entirely empty-handed. But if you stay and you leave the company on day 366...
What happens then? I hit the cliff.
Exactly. On day 366, you have fallen off the highest. The paused drip feed suddenly releases all at once. You instantly vest 25% of your total equity.
So if my total allocation was 50% of the company, I walk away keeping 12.5% of the total stock.
Right. And from month 13 onwards, your remaining shares vest smoothly, month by month, 1/48th at a time, until the end of year 4.
It's essentially a pre-negotiated corporate divorce.
That's exactly what it is.
It forces founders to decouple their messy human emotions from the mechanics of a breakup before the breakup even happens.
Exactly. Because founders do break up. It happens constantly.
Right. The pressure is immense.
People realize they aren't cut out for it, or toxic dynamics emerge. And without vesting, the power dynamics of a breakup are catastrophic.
How so?
Imagine that same scenario, but without a vesting schedule. You and I split the company 50-50 on day 1. We sign the papers. After 1 month, you decide to leave. Legally, you still own half the company.
So now I, the remaining founder, I'm doing 100% of the work, but I'm only capturing 50% of the value I create.
Right. And worse, you now have a massive block of dead weight on your cap table.
Dead weight. And I imagine investors absolutely despise dead weight.
Oh, it is a total deal breaker. If a venture capitalist looks at your cap table and sees that 50% of the company is owned by a guy who hasn't written a line of code or answered a customer email in 3 years,
They're out.
they will literally walk away from the deal. They are investing their money to incentivize the people actively building the company today.
Makes sense.
They are not going to fund a company where half the financial upside of their investment is enriching a ghost. So vesting isn't just about internal fairness. It's a defensive, structural mechanism to ensure the company remains investable to outsiders. It aligns incentives perfectly.
Okay, so you got the perfect equal split and your vesting cliff is set. The cap table is pristine.
Beautiful.
But that perfectly designed cap table is completely, utterly useless if the federal government decides to step in and bankrupt you over it. Which brings us to what might be the most terrifying, anxiety-inducing part of startup mechanics, the state's share. The 83B election and the IRS tax trap.
This is where the hyper-modern digital world of Silicon Valley collides violently with the archaic, paper-based bureaucracy of the federal tax code.
And the friction between the two can destroy a founder's life.
Literally destroy it.
Let's set the stage carefully here, because the math is horrifying. When we talk about equity at the founding stage, founders are legally buying restricted stock from their new Delaware C Corp.
Right, they're literally purchasing it.
Usually they are buying millions of shares for fractions of a penny per share, maybe a total cost of $50. And the stock is restricted because it's subject to that vesting schedule we just talked about.
Exactly. If you leave, the company can restrict your ownership and buy it back.
Right. But the moment you buy that restricted stock, a clock starts ticking. You have exactly 30 days to file a piece of paper called an 83B election with the Internal Revenue Service.
And we mean exactly 30 days, not 31 days, not 35 days, exactly 30 days.
And to understand the sheer financial ruin that awaits a founder who misses this 30-day deadline, you have to understand how the IRS views vesting stock.
Yes, this is the crux of the trap.
The IRS looks at vesting as a form of compensation. Every time a share of stock vests and officially becomes yours, the IRS views it as if the company just handed you the cash equivalent of whatever that share is worth on that specific day.
Right.
Okay, I want to walk through a mathematical example of this because I don't think people grasp how dangerous this is.
Let's do it.
Let's say we start our company. My 5 million shares are initially worth practically nothing. Let's call it $100 total. I get busy coding. I completely forget to file my 83B election within the 30 days.
Which happens all the time, by the way. Founders get busy.
Right. Fast forward exactly 1 year. I hit my cliff. Boom. 25% of my shares vest. So I now officially own 1.25 million shares. But over that year, we've had incredible traction. We just raised a massive Series A round from top VCs, and the company's valuation has skyrocketed to $10 million.
This is where the trap snaps shut, right? Suddenly, the IRS looks at me and says, congratulations. You just vested 25% of a company worth $10 million. That means you just quote-unquote earned $2.5 million in compensation this year. You owe us ordinary income tax on $2.5 million.
Precisely. And what is the lethal flaw in this scenario for you, the founder?
The stock is completely illiquid. I can't sell it. It's a private company. I haven't seen a single dollar of actual spendable cash. But I owe the IRS, what, like $1 million in taxes? Immediately.
Yes, you owe a massive tax bill on phantom income. You are instantly personally bankrupt.
That is so messed up.
The IRS does not care that you can't sell the stock. They assess the value and they demand the tax. The 83B election is the magic shield against this.
How does the shield work?
Filing that piece of paper tells the IRS, I elect to be taxed on the total value of my stock today when I buy it, rather than as it vests over the next 4 years.
So because the stock is only worth $100 today, I pay taxes on $100, which is basically zero.
Exactly.
And when the stock vests next year at a $10 million valuation, the IRS can't touch it as income. Exactly. It locks in your tax burden at the absolute lowest possible point. But the logistics of filing the shield are where the archaic bureaucracy becomes absurd.
Right. You would think for a document this existentially important, there would be a secure government portal. You log in, authenticate, click a button, and you're safe.
Oh, not even close. You cannot email this form. You cannot submit it online. The IRS, in this context, operates like a black hole.
A black hole.
You must print the form out on physical paper, you must sign it with a wet ink pen, and you must send it via certified mail, specifically requesting a physical return receipt.
It's like something out of the 19th century.
And it gets worse. You must keep that physical return receipt forever.
Forever.
Forever. Because if the IRS loses the paperwork, which happens with alarming frequency when you are dealing with millions of pieces of mail, they will simply claim you never filed it.
So it's your word against the IRS.
And you will lose. The burden of proof is entirely, 100% on the founder. If you don't have that little green certified mail slip to prove they received it, you lose.
I look at this and I think of it like a Horcrux from Harry Potter.
Okay, like that.
You know, a piece of a wizard's soul hidden in an ordinary object. This mundane, easily losable slip of post office paper is the one magical artifact that keeps the founder's entire financial life intact. If you lose the Horcrux, your wealth is destroyed by phantom tax liabilities.
That's a brilliant way to visualize it. And the implications extend far beyond just the founder's personal bank account. This is a structural issue for the entire entity.
How does it affect the company, though?
Well, when that startup goes to raise that Series A funding, or when it's wildly successful in getting acquired by Google or Facebook,
Right.
the lawyers for the investors or the acquirer will demand to see that physical 83B receipt during due diligence.
Why do they care?
Yeah,
It's the founder's personal tax problem, right?
because a bankrupt founder is a massive operational risk to the company. If the acquirer's lawyers ask for the receipt and you say, oh, I lost it or I forgot to file it, they will often literally walk away from a multi-million-dollar acquisition.
You're joking. They'd kill the whole deal.
Yes, the risk of the key technical founder being suddenly bankrupted by the IRS, having their wages garnished, and being emotionally destroyed by a massive tax audit, it creates far too much instability. The investors cannot stomach that risk. The deal dies.
It's staggering. But I really have to pause and marvel at the fragility of this.
It is fragile.
You're telling me that a billion-dollar hyper-growth technology company, a company building artificial intelligence or reinventing global logistics, employing thousands of people, can be completely derailed by a lost slip of paper from the post office. How is that even possible in the 21st century? It feels like there should be a workaround.
It highlights a profound, almost humbling vulnerability in the startup ecosystem. Startups view themselves as apex disruptors. They break the rules of legacy industries. But underneath it all, they are absolutely immovably bound by the strict, unforgiving rules of legacy governmental systems.
Right, you can't disrupt the IRS.
You can disrupt the global taxi industry with an app, but you cannot disrupt the Internal Revenue Code. The 83B receipt is proof that no matter how innovative your tech is, the state always gets its structural dominance acknowledged first.
Okay, so you've survived the gauntlet so far. You've incorporated perfectly in Delaware. You've split the equity fairly with a 4-year vest and a 1-year cliff. You've mailed your 83B to the IRS black hole and locked the receipt in a fireproof safe.
The foundation is set.
The foundation is set. Now, you need fuel. You need capital to actually build the thing. Which brings us to the influx of capital, dealing with investors, valuation mechanics, and the hidden dangers of who you take money from.
Right, because once the internal legal mechanics are secure, the power dynamic shifts dramatically. It moves from internal co-founder negotiations to external investor relationships.
And the very first mechanical choice a founder makes when raising money is how to structure the investment, specifically whether the round is priced or unpriced.
Let's define those, because the jargon gets thick here.
Yeah, please. A priced round is the traditional way people think of investing, right? You actually set a valuation for the company.
Exactly. You agree with the investor that the company is worth, say, $5 million pre-money. The investor puts in $1 million. So the post-money valuation is $6 million, and they own exactly 1/6 of the company.
Got it.
They are issued new shares, and everyone else's ownership percentage is diluted to make room for those new shares.
That seems straightforward enough.
It requires a lot of math, a lot of negotiation over the exact valuation, and crucially, it requires incredibly expensive lawyers to draft the complex stock purchase agreements.
Which takes time and money.
For an early-stage startup raising their first few $100,000, a priced round is often too slow and too expensive, which is why early rounds are almost universally unpriced.
Okay, unpriced rounds use instruments like convertible notes or SAFEs. And SAFE stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. Let's dig into the SAFE, because Y Combinator actually invented this instrument, and it revolutionized early-stage fundraising. How does it work?
A SAFE is essentially a contract that says, You, the investor, are giving me money today. I am not giving you shares today because we don't know what the company is worth yet.
Right, because it's just two guys and a laptop.
Exactly. But when we eventually do a priced round in the future, say our Series A, your initial investment will convert into equity at that future price.
So it kicks the can down the road.
It allows the startup to get the cash immediately without spending months arguing over valuation or paying lawyers tens of thousands of dollars to draft equity documents.
And usually there's a valuation cap to protect the investor, right?
Yes, the cap is crucial.
So if the investor gives me a $100 K now and the company explodes and is worth $100 million at the Series A, the investor doesn't get screwed by only getting a microscopic fraction of a percent. The cap guarantees they convert at a maximum agreed-upon valuation, say $10 million, ensuring they get a massive reward for taking that early risk.
Precisely. Unpriced rounds are vastly superior for early speed, but the real danger highlighted by the experts isn't the mechanical instrument itself. The instrument is fine.
What's the danger then?
The danger is who you take the money from using those instruments. And this leads to a phenomenon known as the party round.
The party round. It sounds like a great time. Everyone's invited.
It sounds fun, but in practice, it is an operational nightmare.
Let's define it. A party round is when a startup decides to raise, say, $500,000. But instead of taking it from one or two professional venture funds, they take very small checks.
Right. $5,000, $10,000, maybe $25,000.
From a massive crowd of unaccredited or inexperienced angel investors. Your dentist, your rich uncle, your old college roommate.
If we connect this back to power dynamics, taking money from inexperienced investors is a recipe for absolute disaster because they fundamentally misunderstand the timeline and the liquidity mechanics of venture capital.
Explain that. What is a professional VC's mindset versus a dentist's mindset?
Well, professional venture capitalist knows that a startup is a highly illiquid, high-risk 10-year bet. They expect the vast majority of their investments to go to zero.
They know it's a gamble.
They are hunting for the one company in their portfolio that returns 100x and covers all the losses. They know they cannot get their money out until the company IPOs or is acquired a decade later.
But the inexperienced angel investor doesn't think like that.
Not at all.
They view it more like a high-yield savings account. They put in $10,000. 2 years go by. They read a TechCrunch article saying your startup is doing great. But then they decide they want to remodel their kitchen.
Oh, I've seen this happen.
Right. So they call up the founder and say, hey, so proud of you guys. Things look like they're going awesome. Listen, I need to pay a contractor next week. Can I just get my $10,000 back now? Maybe with a little interest.
Exactly. And legally, they are permanently tied to the company's cap table. You can't just hand them cash back. They own a piece of the entity.
Right.
But it gets worse structurally. Even with small checks, these investors often have voting rights or require signatures for major corporate actions. Imagine you are trying to close that vital $5 million Series A round. You need to gather signatures from all existing investors to approve the new share class.
And you have to track down 50 different people who gave you $5,000 each.
Yes. And 3 of them are on vacation, 2 of them changed their email addresses, and 1 of them is actively holding out and refusing to sign because they're mad you didn't return their money for their kitchen remodel.
Wow.
That one disgruntled uncle with a $5,000 safety can literally paralyze a $5 million funding round and kill the company.
The analogy I always use for a party round is like inviting 50 random people to co-drive a bus.
Okay, a bus.
At first, everyone is just happy to be on the bus, enjoying the ride, tossing in their $10 for gas. But at some point, because there's so many of them, they don't understand how the bus actually works.
Someone wants to drive.
Someone in the back is going to try to reach forward and violently grab the steering wheel because they suddenly decided they want to swerve into a drive-thru. It's absolute chaos.
And to build on your bus analogy, institutional investors act as strict bus inspectors. When a massive VC firm looks at your company for a Series A, they inspect the passenger list.
They look at the cap table.
Exactly. If they see 50 random people with their hands near the steering wheel, they won't fund you. They require a clean cap table. So the party round doesn't just cause internal chaos, it actively prevents future funding.
But this danger isn't just limited to small, unsophisticated angels. The experts also heavily warn about overreach from larger institutional investors.
Yes, the pros can be just as dangerous.
When an investor writes a big check, they naturally want control. And they often demand a seat on the board of directors.
Board dynamics are a crucial battleground. The board of directors legally controls the company. They can fire the CEO, they approve budgets, they approve acquisitions.
They hold the real power.
Yes. The ideal early board structure, according to the experts, is 2 founders and 1 investor.
So it's a 3-person board, 2 founders, 1 VC.
Exactly. This ensures the founders retain ultimate voting control. If the founders disagree with the investor, they can outvote them 2-1.
But founders often get starry-eyed. And an investor offers a lot of money, but demands 2 board seats, or asks to add an quote-unquote independent board member that the investor gets to choose.
And if founders give up too many board seats, they literally lose control of their own company on day 1. They can be fired from the entity they created.
Or, even if they don't take board control, they demand extreme information rights. The experts mention investors asking for weekly update calls or requiring the founders to submit detailed monthly budget approvals before they can spend a dime.
That kind of micromanagement suffocates a startup. A startup needs to be agile.
Yeah, you have to move fast.
If the founder ends up spending 3 days a week writing reports, generating spreadsheets, and justifying a $500 software expense to an investor instead of building the product or talking to customers, the company will die.
The power dynamic shifts entirely.
Yes. The founder ceases to be an entrepreneur executing a bold vision and becomes a middle manager constantly reporting to a demanding, anxious boss.
Okay, let's inject some harsh reality into this. I'm going to play out a scenario.
All right.
A startup is starving for runway. They have exactly 2 weeks of cash left before they miss payroll and have to shut down the Amazon servers. The founders are desperate. An investor comes along and offers a $50,000 check.
A lifeline.
But the investor is an annoying, micromanaging nightmare who wants a board seat and weekly reports. Can a founder really afford to be picky in that moment? Isn't any money good money when you are staring death in the face?
It is the ultimate test of survival versus long-term viability. And this introduces the concept of expensive money.
Expensive money, I like that phrase.
So we tend to think of all cash as green and equal, but the terms, the legal hooks, and the emotional baggage attached to that cash vary wildly.
So you're saying taking the $50,000 might save them today, but kill them tomorrow?
Exactly. If taking that $50,000 check from a toxic investor saves you today, but that investor now holds a board seat and aggressively blocks a $5 million funding round next year because they don't understand the complex dilution terms,
Then that check was a poison pill.
that $50,000 check was the most expensive money you ever took. The distraction, the legal headaches, the paralysis of the board, and the operational chaos cost far, far more than the initial capital provided in value.
Wow.
Sometimes letting the company die and starting fresh is actually structurally preferable to permanently binding yourself to a toxic entity that will torture you for a decade.
Wow. Okay, so let's assume you navigate all of that. Capital is secured, hopefully from sophisticated, hands-off investors. The cap table is clean. The fuel is in the tank.
Ready to build.
Now, the focus shifts inward again to how that capital is actually deployed on a daily basis. And this brings us to what might be the most counterintuitive part of startup culture, the extortion trap.
Ah, yes.
We need to talk about founder wages, corporate treasuries, and how the romantic myths of startup hustle actually turn into massive, weaponized legal liabilities.
This is a fascinating area because it's where the mythological image of the heroic startup founder actively works against them.
Right. The Silicon Valley mythology dictates that you should eat nothing but ramen, sleep under your desk in a sleeping bag, put every single company expense on your personal credit card to rack up points, and work entirely for sweat equity to prove your absolute ascetic dedication to the vision.
But legally, operating like that is walking into a minefield blindfolded. First of all, the absolute baseline rule, separating personal and corporate funds.
Why is that so hard for people?
Because it's their company. But we establish that the company is a separate legal entity. The investor's money is sitting in the company's corporate bank account. It is not the founder's personal piggy bank.
It sounds obvious, but the lack of financial discipline in early-stage founders is staggering. The experts share a terrifying yet common anecdote.
The Vegas story.
Yeah. A founder raised a seed round, felt incredibly rich, and decided to treat the company treasury as their own personal reward system. They took the corporate card, flew to Las Vegas, partied, bought expensive dinners, and posted the photos on Facebook.
Which is just spectacularly dumb.
I mean, using a corporate card for personal expenses isn't just bad accounting, It's literally embezzling from your own future.
It is embezzlement. And when the board or the investors found out, that founder was immediately unceremoniously removed from the company.
Fired from their own startup.
Exactly. The legal entity must be respected. But even if founders aren't going to Vegas and blowing money on roulette, they get tripped up by something much more mundane, employment laws.
Right, because if the company is a legally distinct, separate entity, then the founders who work for it are legally classified as employees of that entity, even if they own 50% of the stock.
They are still employees.
And what does federal labor law require for all employees in the United States?
It requires that they be paid at least the federal and state minimum wage.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. Working for sweat equity alone is illegal. Full stop. You cannot legally agree to work for $0, even if you are the CEO and majority shareholder. The law does not care about your hustle.
It's the law.
Furthermore, because you are an employee receiving a wage, the corporate entity must remit payroll taxes on those wages to the government.
And people ignore this constantly. The YC experts note that one of their companies simply blew off their payroll taxes for 3 years because they wanted to conserve cash.
It was a massive disaster.
The experts point out that in extreme cases, failing to remit payroll taxes doesn't just pierce the corporate veil. Founders can literally face personal federal prison time for it.
Don't mess with the IRS.
Exactly. But the real day-to-day danger of unpaid wages isn't just an IRS audit. It's the extortion trap it creates during a founder breakup.
This dynamic is a masterclass in how legal leverage works. Let's walk through the role play step by step.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's say you and I are co-founders. We decide to be scrappy. We want to show investors how dedicated we are, so we agree not to pay ourselves any salaries for the first year. We are just living off savings, grinding it out.
Sweating it out.
8 months in, the pressure cooker explodes. We hate each other. I realize you are technically incompetent, and I decide to fire you.
Okay, so I'm fired. And because we set up our pristine 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff, and it's only been 8 months, I haven't hit the cliff. I should theoretically leave with exactly 0 stock. The system works, right?
That is how it should work.
Yeah.
But you go hire an aggressive employment lawyer.
Here we go.
That lawyer looks at the situation and says, wait a minute. You worked 80-hour weeks for 8 months, and the company never paid you minimum wage. That is a flagrant violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Oh, wow. So they find a loophole.
A huge one. So your lawyer sends me, the remaining founder, a letter, and the letter says, you broke federal labor law. My client is going to sue the company for unpaid wages, penalties, and legal fees.
That's bad.
It gets worse. Furthermore, we are going to report the company to the Department of Labor, which will likely trigger a massive audit and scare off all your current and future investors.
That is terrifying.
It is. But then the letter offers a solution. However, my client is willing to waive all these labor claims and walk away quietly. If you agree to accelerate their vesting schedule and let them walk away with 10% of the company's equity.
Wow. It is pure, weaponized legal leverage.
Exactly. Unpaid wages become a loaded gun pointed at the cap table. The fired founder can extort unearned, vested stock from the remaining team simply by threatening to expose the labor law violation.
And how do you think the remaining founder reacts? They're terrified. A lawsuit will drain the company's tiny cash reserves. An audit will kill their upcoming Series A. So usually the remaining founder just caves.
They sign the agreement, give up the 10% equity, and the fired founder walks away victorious.
So the remaining founder is now left working 100-hour weeks, bleeding for the company, building massive value over the next decade, all to enrich an ex-founder who essentially extorted their way onto the cap table because they didn't get paid minimum wage for 8 months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why the experts reframe the concept of paying minimum wage entirely. It is not a luxury. It is not about personal comfort. Paying minimum wage is a marital prenup for the founding team.
A prenup.
It is a cheap monthly insurance policy to ensure that if a breakup happens, it is a clean mechanical break.
Because if you paid the minimum wage all along, that lawyer has 0 leverage.
Right. If you pay everyone minimum wage, then when you fire someone at month 8, before their cliff, you just hand them their final paycheck, they sign a standard separation agreement, and they leave. There is no lingering liability. There is no gun to your head.
I understand the logic perfectly.
Okay.
But again, I have to step into the shoes of the founder trying to raise money. Investors want to see founders fully committed. They want to see scrappiness and capital efficiency. If I raise a $500,000 seed round, and on day 1 I immediately set up an extensive payroll system, hire an HR compliance firm, and start paying my co-founders and myself salaries. Doesn't that signal to the investors that we aren't willing to bleed for the company? Doesn't it look like we're just treating their high-risk investment as a cushy corporate job?
This is a critical distinction, and it separates amateur founders from mature operators. There is a massive, highly visible difference between paying yourself a lavish $150,000 tech bro salary out of a tiny seed round and paying yourself the legal minimum wage of $15 an hour just to stay compliant with federal law.
Ah, so it's about the magnitude of the salary.
It's about demonstrating competence. Investors expect you to be scrappy, absolutely, but sophisticated investors do not expect you to break federal labor laws.
Like-
When an investor sees that you have set up proper payroll to pay minimum wage, they don't think you are lazy. They think, okay, this founder understands corporate liability. They are protecting my investment from future extortion lawsuits.
Scrappiness is a virtue. Breaking the law and leaving the corporate entity open to catastrophic vulnerability is not scrappy, it's just reckless.
Completely reckless.
Okay, so you've done everything right. You paid everyone minimum wage, you protected the flank. But inevitably, human nature takes over. The pressure cooker of a startup environment forces cracks. People burn out. Co-founders realize they have fundamentally different visions.
It happens to almost everyone.
And when those relationships irreparably break, the mechanics of termination take center stage. Which brings us to our final area of analysis, the mechanics of severance. Firing a friend and protecting the core asset of the company.
This is perhaps the most emotionally brutal aspect of building a company. Firing someone, especially a co-founder or an early employee who believed in the vision when it was just a napkin sketch, who took a massive risk to join you.
It's gut-wrenching.
It is described by the experts as the ultimate test of a real founder. It is emotionally agonizing, but mechanically it must be executed with cold, clinical, almost robotic precision.
The guidelines provided by Y Combinator's legal team are incredibly strict. Firing must be done quickly. It must be face-to-face, never over email or Slack.
Never.
A third party, like another founder or an HR representative, should ideally be present as a silent witness. And most importantly, there are no long explanations or debates. You do not argue about performance metrics. You do not rehash old arguments. You just state the incontrovertible fact of the termination.
And the reason for this coldness is purely structural. It is not about being cruel. It is about risk mitigation.
How so?
In a modern startup, the company's entire value often rests on incredibly fragile, highly accessible intellectual property. It's the source code, it's the proprietary customer list, it's the strategic roadmap.
It's all digital.
When you sit across from someone and tell them they are fired, the logical part of their brain shuts down. Human emotions take over completely. Anger, betrayal, panic, a desire for vengeance.
Flight or fight kicks in.
And in that highly charged emotional state, a person with admin access to the company's core assets can do existential, unrecoverable damage in a matter of seconds.
The YC experts share a terrifying cautionary tale about exactly this. A startup fired a technical founder. It was messy and emotional. But the remaining team failed to execute the mechanical side of the termination. They didn't immediately cut off digital access.
A huge mistake.
That fired founder walked out, went home, logged in, and changed the passwords to the company's GitHub repository.
And for those who don't know, GitHub is where all the company's source code lives. It is the literal DNA of the product.
Right. They locked the remaining team out. They held the entire intellectual value of the company hostage. They essentially said, pay me what I want or I delete the code base.
Which is exactly why the mechanical execution of a firing must be entirely decoupled from human emotion. The process must be orchestrated.
Orchestrated. What does that mean in practice?
The moment the words, "your employment is terminated," are spoken in that meeting room, physical and digital access must already be severed. The passwords must be changed. The cloud infrastructure must be locked down. The key cards must be deactivated.
Before they even leave the room.
Yes. Furthermore, to avoid any of those lingering legal hooks we discussed earlier, all accrued wages and unpaid vacation time must be handed to them in a physical check right then and there.
A clean break.
And the company must immediately send formal notice repurchasing any unvested shares according to the corporate bylaws.
It's like an emergency quarantine protocol on a deep space vessel.
Oh, I like this analogy.
If there's a catastrophic hull breach and a crew member is trapped in the compromised sector, you don't open the comms and argue with them about whose fault the breach was.
Right.
You don't negotiate, you just slam the airlock shut to save the rest of the ship.
Right.
It is brutal. It feels inhumane in the moment, but it's the absolute only way the vessel itself survives.
It is a harsh analogy, but it's the reality of corporate stewardship. The entity's survival supersedes individual feelings. The founder's fiduciary duty is to the company, the investors, and the remaining employees, not to the person being fired.
But I really have to question the cultural impact of this. Startups run on passion. If the employee being fired is a close friend, and in early startups they almost always are, doesn't this mechanical airlock ceiling approach destroy the company culture? Doesn't it send a chilling message to the rest of the team that they aren't a family, they are just disposable cogs in a ruthless machine?
It is a profound paradox, but the experts synthesize it perfectly. Protecting the culture for the remaining employees actually requires being swift, decisive, and legally sound with the departing one.
Wait, how does being ruthless protect the culture?
Because what destroys company culture is not a clean firing. What destroys culture is when a founder lingers in negotiations out of guilt. What destroys morale is when a toxic or incompetent employee is allowed to hang around for months, dragging the team down.
Oh, I see.
Or worse, when a founder fumbles a firing so badly that it results in a massive distracting lawsuit or a hostage situation with the IP, that is what makes employees feel unsafe.
Yeah, that would be terrifying for the rest of the team.
Exactly. A clean mechanical break protects the remaining team from chaos. It signals to everyone else that the founder is capable of making the agonizing, hard choices required to keep the ship safe.
Okay, let's step back and look at the entire massive blueprint we've just laid out over this deep dive. We've journeyed from the raw formation of the entity in Delaware through the psychological minefields of equity distribution, battling the archaic tax traps of the IRS, navigating the treacherous waters of party rounds and board control, avoiding the weaponized leverage of unpaid wages, and finally, executing the ultimate mechanical severing of ties.
It's a lot of machinery.
It is. What is the grand takeaway here? What does this all mean for the ecosystem?
It means that the legal and accounting mechanics of a startup are not just boring administrative chores to be outsourced to a lawyer and forgotten about. They are the actual invisible structural forces that dictate reality.
The forces that hold it all together.
Yes, they are the defensive walls that protect intellectual property. They are the mechanisms that manage and contain the deeply volatile power dynamics of equity, greed, and human emotion. And ultimately, they are the only things that shield founders from personal, catastrophic financial ruin.
For you, the listener, the application of this knowledge is universal. Whether you are evaluating a job offer at a hot new startup and trying to understand your own stock options, whether you are considering investing your own money into a friend's venture, or whether you are sitting in your garage right now sketching out an idea that you think could change the world,
Yeah,
you have to look past the shiny pitch deck.
you really do.
You have to look at the mechanics. Is it a Delaware C Corp? Is there a strict 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff to protect against dead weight? Are they meticulously filing their 83B elections? Are they disciplined enough to pay themselves minimum wage and avoid the extortion trap?
Because if they aren't, it's a house of cards.
Because all the visionary brilliance in the world won't save a company built on a Connecticut LLC with a 50-person party round and no vesting. The boring, rigid paperwork is the true, unfiltered indicator of a company's viability.
The paperwork is the chassis of the vehicle. If the chassis is strong, perfectly aligned, and built to spec, the engine of innovation can push that vehicle to incredible, world-changing speeds.
But if the chassis is weak?
If the chassis is weak or fundamentally flawed, that same powerful engine will just vibrate the vehicle until it tears itself apart on the launch pad.
Which brings us back to where we started. We celebrate startups for their wild, rule-breaking innovation. We idolize the rebels in the hoodies who disrupt massive legacy industries. But if their survival fundamentally requires strict, unquestioning obedience to standardized corporate structures, predictable building schedules, and century-old IRS tax codes, it leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought.
What's that?
Are startups actually disrupting the system? Or have they simply perfected the art of packaging radical, dangerous ideas into the safest, most predictable, and legally rigid financial vehicles ever designed?
That is the ultimate paradox of Silicon Valley. Radical, chaotic disruption contained perfectly within a plain vanilla box.
The machinery isn't broken after all. You just have to know exactly which gears to look at